Well, hello there. It's Frank Bergen who wants to share a video with you of just local flying. It'll be from east end of Burns Lake up Forestdale, and then we'll come back over top of town and we'll head out along Highway 35 out to the ferry landing at Francois Lake. Strictly local flying. Once we take off here, we'll fly only. It'll be all aerial views, no nothing else inserted. So here I am down at the lake. Got the baby unfolded and just backed into the lake with pickup in the trailer, and the bird is afloat here. So I'll just get my things together and hop aboard, and then we'll go see the scenery around home. There, I'll just get aboard, and of course you're in the back seat along with me. You might not be able to see you, but you're there, and we'll share the country. There, just there. Wow, that old motor really vibrates everything once it takes hold, but we'll just slip out in the lake here and get on our way. I'll just show you various segments of takeoff here. There, I'm just turning, and I'll just put the camera on my lap, the one that I have with me, and here we go. I'll just speed up the old motor and prepare for takeoff. There, we're just gaining a little speed here, and we'll get another view. We'll get a wingtip view here in a minute. There we are. That's the way it would look from the wingtip. Just lifted off. And now we'll get a ground view. There, that's the way it would look if you were on the ground. I was actually going to put the original sound on this track, but I didn't plug something in, so we'll have all secondary sounds here. And we're coming past home. That's home there at Tintagle, east of Burns Lake. Home. Crystal Road. There, we just passed home. That's Hennessy's there. Hennessy's airfield that he built just a few years ago. Heading east. We'll just get a view in behind us there as we've just lifted off from Loper's Beach at Tintagle. There, you see the water still dribbling off the floats. We're just taking off from behind us there. Rear view. There's a view of the left-hand side again, heading east along Highway 16. That's the Hawes Loop in behind there. East end of Burns Lake in the background. That's the Hawes Loop again. And towards the Coffee Cup country. East end. This is at the Coffee Cup. Used to be a Coffee Cup restaurant there. That's where it's got its name, the Coffee Cup country. On the east end of Burns Lake. This is where the Stearns have lived so long, and the Hawes. And looking towards Bergen Mill now. Used to be the Freeport years gone by. The east end of Bergen Lake. That was a big construction camp here, right where Bergen Mill sits today, when the railroad was built in the early 1900s. I've been told there was up to 1,500 men that lived in that construction camp at Freeport. And of course, that's where they had kind of an argument or whatever, and that's where a fella's buried up on the side hill there. Kelly, I believe his name would have been. There's the outflow of Bergen Lake. All the water running east, eventually into the Fraser system. Bergen Forest Products. This started about in the mid-70s is when Bergen Forest Products came into being. When all this was constructed here was about the middle 70s. Looking east, this would have been at Sheraton. That would have been the Freeport down below here. And Bergen Forest Products, but this was at Sheraton. Years ago when the railroad was still the main transportation mode, then from Bergen Lake heading east we had Tintagel, and then we had Sheraton, and then we had Priestley, and on like that. We'll just make a turn there. That's Tibbetts Lake. This used to be Tibbetts country, a native fella. That's where he lived here before, way long time ago. It was Tibbetts land. Now we've made the turn, and we'll be heading west now for a long time. That east end of Bergen Lake has so many islands and inlets and whatever. It's a wonderful boat ride down through here. Of course, all this video is taken in the fall of '95. There, east end of Bergen Lake again. Like I said, all those islands and inlets. Big bay in the bottom here. That's the coffee cup and country in the background. Oh, and there's a start of Squawfish Lake on this side of the Bergen Lake, and Hawes Loop in the background. It was. East end of Bergen's behind us, Squawfish Lake on this side, Hawes Loop in the background. There's Hennessy's. And looking towards home where we took off. And there's Maud and Crystal appearing there, and some other little ones. And that's Cliff Lake. It's up higher on the south side from home there. Quite a bit higher under the cliff there. Oh, we're at 3,600 feet. That's looking at home. Tintagel. On the narrows at the left-hand side, that's where we just took off. There's Crystal and Maud on the left. Crystal and Maud. Beautiful, absolute crystal clear water. Behind us again, the Hawes Loop area. And home. See, there's Crystal, and it's got that unique little formation of some kind of mineral in the bottom there built up. That's where we just took off. There's Lopers. Jack and Nan Lopers. And, oh, this was, our kids were down riding a boat there that day as they were heading for the Narrows in the boat. We were coming to the Narrows here that the railroad cut off when it was built. The lake used to make quite a jog there, and then The CNR railway construction cut the lake off. See there, it would have went over to the left, and then they dredged out a tip of that peninsula there so the water could go more direct. There's a boat right in the Narrows, and the other one's just approaching. There, looking behind us, there's Loper's Fields again. And we'll just make a circle here, and then we'll get on our way. This Loper's farm here, that in the years gone by, it was, that's the old Tintagle Road. That's the old Prince George Highway through the old Tintagle Road settlement, now so-called. Looking north. And this farm below here, before Loper's there, it was Norse's. And at one time it was Van de Veen's. They had a dairy farm there. Looking back where we took off from, just in the Narrows there at Loper's Gravel Pit. Home was in the extreme left-hand upper corner. Now we've made the turn, and we're back on our way, heading towards town. There's the Freeport Trailer Court, east of Burns Lake. And there's the rock cuts as you would go along there with Highway 16. Looking towards, there's behind us again at the rock cuts. And we're coming upon the big cut here, so it was called. That was a horrendous fill there that it took 2 years to complete, and there was hundreds and hundreds of men that worked on that big cut there. There's a lot of loss of life there apparently too. Edmonds Island Park down in the bottom there, that's a little provincial park. Looking towards Burns Lake, and that's Giroux Island. Named after the Giroux family that's been around Burns Lake for so long. Don Giroux used to have a hotel, Burns Lake, town on the lake of Burns Lake. We're kind of swinging in behind us the way the highway would go, looking behind us where we come from again. Again, it's Giroux Island. And the bridge on the upper side there that connects the town to Giroux Island. This Burns Lake came into being in the early 1900s when the railroad would come through. And Barney Mulvaney, I think he was one of the early Burns Lake entrepreneurs there. There was many before him, but Barney kind of got the town itself going. He had his tent town there, and then it kind of sprung away from that. Of course, there was many, many people way before Barney that were here. Burnt Lake, I think it was originally called, because it was a big burn here at one time when the surveyors first came through in the late 1800s when they were surveying for the telegraph line. That's the channel between Burns and the Decker Lakes. There's the channel. At one time the road ended at the east end of Burns Lake, and they had a scow on that through here to the west end of Decker Lake, and then they would carry on again. There, we're swinging back under the wing to have a look at Burns Lake town. Giroux Island. And that's the start of Decker Lake. It's the east end of Decker Lake. Many people living along. I quit naming people because a few years down the road it changes hands. But this has been Bruce Thompson's for very, very long. Used to have a sawmill there. Behind us, Burns Lake view, town view. And we'll swing along Highway 16 as you would be traveling along the far side there if you're heading towards Prince Rupert. Decker Lake. Some of the... This used to be the Star sawmill. They had a log dump there right on the point at one time in the early 60s. Now we're coming upon the Decker Lake Village. That was the old Goodwin place down below here. And Paul Peachy used to have the place on the point there before Hap Porter had it. And of course now his son Bob's there. And that up top there's Burns Lake Specialty Woods. There again's the Goodwin place. And this was the Porters. And it was Peachy before that. Decker Lake School. And above that's the Burns Lake Specialty Woods operation. Out at Decker Lake town, village. We've got Decker Lake on Decker Lake, and we got Burns Lake on Burns Lake. And this is Decker Lake village. In the summer of '95, they got pavement out in their back secondary streets there and roads. And down right in the bottom here, that used to be Decker Lake Lumber Company. On this side of the tracks. Decker Lake Lumber Company. And then Decker Lake Forest Products started here before they moved to Pauling. Out at Decker Lake. That's Decker Lake Heights up top there, subdivision. Swinging in behind us, Peachy's Point. That's where Larry Hope and Ted Williams started Decker Lake Forest Products. Was in the old Decker lumber yard there, and then they moved out to Pauling there in the early 70s. And this coming upon Sauls here. Bob and Don Sauls, their grandfather homesteaded out here, and then their father lived out here for a long time too. Gin Saul, the old magistrate and Dominica cafe owner. This is out at Sauls, west of Decker Lake Village. And a peek at Pauling. It's all that Pauling, nice farming community above. Not a very big area, but very nice. And that's the west end of Decker Lake. There again, the camera that's the East Pauling Road, going up high there, off of Highway 16. And we're coming upon a new subdivision here, that the native subdivision that's going to be put in there at Pauling. That's Hartsfields. This will be quite a subdivision here eventually. They're just constructed lagoons, Pauling up top. And Hartsfields. That was all poplars there in the early 70s or 60s, and he did a lot of clearing. That's George and Bernice Hart. And see, you can just in the corner, you can see George's little Avid aircraft there. He keeps it parked, and he can take off and land on his own little lake there. That's man-made lake. He built that there specifically for himself. It used to be just a creek through there. Pauling in the background. There's the West Pauling Road. That's where we lived for a while, and then we moved to Tintagel in '66. And this is the Decker Lake Forest Products Sawmill. And that's West Babine, as it's called now. The Babine Forest Group bought it in '95, it would be. Behind us again. There's all the pole yard. This is Decker Lake Forest Products. West Babine, so-called. Pauling in the background. That's the north road from the mill. And now we're coming upon, this is where there used to be a couple little sawmills here. Roland's and Bobo Anderson and so forth. They had us. This is the Burns Lake Airport. This is Baker's Field here, the old Baker's Airfield out at Pauling. Burns Lake's industrial airport, international we'll call it. Rose Lake country. Now we're coming just past Rose Lake. This is a little lake that's just on the south side of the tracks from Rose Lake, which is on the other side. But that's where there's Paynes and Humphreys have been there for so long. That's Rose Lake proper there on the far side of the tracks. Lots of lakes. This is the headwaters of the Fraser, you might say. Just between Rose Lake here and Forestdale, or Buckley Lake, that's where the water changes course. This water ahead of us, that still runs down the Fraser, out at Rose Lake. But then just to the left of us here, the water starts running towards the Skeena. Oh, there's old Choo-Choo coming there, the CNR train. And looking behind us again, a little bit towards the Pauling country, up at Rose Lake. Rose Lake, with the Choo-Choo train just ahead and east. And just about right dead center there, that's where the water changes flow. And on the left-hand side is Buckley Lake. That's Skeena watershed. Just that short little distance is where the water. And that's out the left-hand side. That's Bador Lake, south of Rose Lake, Bador Lake. That's looking back towards where we come from. That's Buckley Lake. We're south of Buckley Lake. Afterwards, when we turn, we'll be flying on the other side of the lake when we're heading the other way. This is Buckley Lake, head of the Buckley River, which eventually runs into the Maurice. And that is up there, that's Strimbold's now. It used to be Oscar Anderson. This is Strimbold country. This is where Oscar Anderson lived for so long. Oscar and Mary. Mary Anderson, she still lives in town. It's not the Mary Anderson that does all the skiing, but the other Mary Anderson. Oscar, he was a real Thai man all his years. Buckley Lake. We're on the south side of Buckley Lake. Directly underneath us, that's where Leonard Anderson, I believe his name was. Young fella, he was working in the bush there and got hit by a tree, and he got as far as his pickup, and he had internal injuries, and that's where they found him. There's the young, strong man, very sad. Mary's oldest son. There we are, Buckley Lake and Strimboldville. Archie Strimbold bought that in the late 80s, somewhere in there. And up here is where Espern Johnson, that was another one of the famous old-timers. His son Rolf still lives there, Rolf Johnson, up at Forestdale. They're kind of looking behind us again. Buckley Lake was there. And right about here is where Espern Johnson lived. And another train. This looks like a coal train. I believe that's where Rolf Johnson lives, right there. Looking up towards the crossing where the road goes to Day Lake and so forth. Maxan Lake, the main road. I believe that's Rolf's right there, I believe. Buckley Lake in the background. I think we're just going to kind of turn here and kind of head back. We kind of go north a little bit at the Broman Lake country. Topley would be behind us. Oh, we're at 3,500 now. Yeah, these are the big fields. Just as you're going up the hill over 6 Mile, you'd never see these beautiful big hay fields there. That farmer has on the just west of Broman Lake. Just west of Broman Lake. Broman Lake would be up just to the left of that little lake. There's Broman Lake, the old store and service station and so forth on Broman Lake. Now we're heading east again. This would be where Sturgeon lived for so long, and up ahead there is where Raymond Ball lives. That's Sturgeon, one of the original homesteaders. There we're looking south, Buckley Lake, and up high there, that's Max Ann Lake. Up high, that'd be Max Ann. There, that's where Sturgeon, Neville Sturgeon. Oh, that's Ball. No, that's where Ray Ball lives. Yeah, that's where the Ball family. It's right there, Sturgeons and Balls. That corner's where Charlie Goodwin got hit by that lumber truck and lost his life. That's the corner. That's looking at Rose Lake again. Just along the highway, the many different people that live out at Rose Lake. That's the lake itself there. Looking towards where we came from on the far side. We were heading west before. Oh, I can't think of who lives up there now. That's an old place. There's a lot of history to this country, how the old-timers made a living here for so long. I believe that might have been one of the Horning places. Hornings were up here for a long time, too. Rose Lake country. Before we were on the far side of the railway, now we're on the north side, because we're heading east now at Rose Lake. There's some active logging there, some roadside logging in the summer of '95 out at Rose Lake. Pauling in the background. Now we're coming upon the Pauling country there. Pauling. Oh, there we are again. Bakersfield, that's Burns Lake Airport right there. And that's the Decker Lake, and then swinging towards the Pauling community. That's the very back end of the, what's the name of that road up at Pauling? Lindos used to live back there. Anyway, Pauling. Yeah, that's where Millers live now. Little racetrack there, the dirt track. And that under the cliff up top there, that's where Reynolds, Cecil Reynolds,